Thank you, Linda Hinton. Linda, thank you. Thanks so much for the warm introduction. Chris, thank you for your incredible leadership. I see you on MSNBC. I see you standing up. I see the energy of this union. I appreciate all that. I appreciate when you've come together with the flight attendants and the IUE and the history of the CWA and all. Linda talked about the CWA. When I was Secretary of State, we organized my office. We did neutral card check, and we had the CWA representing the workers in my office. So. And my wife's been a CWA member, and my daughter's been a CWA member. So now this is my real voice. I'm not sick. I don't smoke. I just talk this way. This is a true story. My wife and I were at an event one time in a room much smaller than this. No tables and chairs. Everybody just kind of standing in, sort of packed against each other. And I was on the stage with a couple people and started talking a little bit. There's 2 or 3 of us speaking. And this guy standing next to my wife, whom she had never met before, turns to her and says, "God, I hate that guy's voice." And she said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, when that guy talks, it's like," and he goes like this, he said, "it's like fingernails on a blackboard." And my wife kind of says, "Well, you know, I like his voice." And she said, "You like that guy's voice?" And she said, "Yeah, you know when I really like his voice?" And he said, "When?" She goes like this, and he leans in. She said, "I really like his voice when he wakes me up in the middle of the night and says, 'I love you, baby.'" So, true story. Just had a really, on the way in here, just had a really good talk with Frank and Diane and Annie and Todd and others here about what's going on in the country, about organizing. I want to talk about organizing efforts in a moment, including a couple that we're working on in Ohio and how important it is. But first, just a huge congratulations on what this union did with Verizon. It was my wife, who I said was a CWA member, she grew up, and her dad carried a union card for the utility workers in Ashtabula, Ohio. It's the far northeast corner of the state. Somehow Bob Dylan once did a song about Ashtabula, and he rhymed Ashtabula and Honolulu, something only Bob Dylan could do. But he carried a union card for 37 years. When she was growing up, twice they went on strike. And both times they weren't as well known, obviously, as a Verizon strike. They weren't as large as yours. Didn't get the attention yours did. But each time, Connie knows, as all trade unionists know, you never catch up after a strike, and how hard it is, and how nobody wants to do it. I mean, some people in the public, the Wall Street Journal and people like you like to strike and you're just greedy, whatever they say. But understanding you always sacrifice, and when you go out on strike like you did, and you have the kind of leadership you do with Chris, and you have the kind of activism that all of you in this, the solidarity and the support of other unions, you know what it means. I saw that in Ohio in 2011, it was, when the governor attacked public employee collective bargaining rights. And they just had this new right-wing anti-union legislature, as we see in Michigan and Indiana and Wisconsin and all over the country, North Carolina. And we fought back. They took collective bargaining rights away, and there was this huge coalition. And it wasn't just public employees that fought back. It was private sector unions. It was the more conservative, sometimes building trades. It was the industrial unions. It was the service unions. Everybody pulled together, and in that, we weren't even sure we were going to win. It was the only time in American history when collective bargaining rights were on a statewide ballot. We won by 22 points, and nobody saw it coming except for the people that did it. And when I think of what you have all done with Verizon, some of you in this room were on strike yourselves. All of you in this room supported this, such an important union issue. And now, instead of more outsourcing, Verizon's creating new jobs here, and you're going to have a real chance to organize them, and that's got to be your mission. And you know, there's obviously so much more you're doing. You're fighting on behalf of thousands of workers in the financial sector, understanding that I was at my 45th high school reunion last fall. I was sitting across from a woman whom I'd gone to high school with. My class was 400 students, And so I didn't know everybody well, and many I hadn't stayed in touch with. She's sitting across from me. She worked at a large bank in Mansfield, Ohio, my hometown of 50,000. She'd worked there 30 years. She was making $30,000 a year. She was a bank teller. So think how important your work is. The average bank teller in this country makes $12.50 an hour. $12.50 an hour. And they have to buy more expensive clothes. They have to do certain things. And $12.50 an hour. You're fighting. I know how hard you're fighting to protect flight attendants. The labor movement is more important now than ever before, as you know. Whether it's flight attendants, whether it's Norwegian Air, whether it's T-Mobile, all the kinds of things you're doing are so very, very important. Now, we also know we have a fight on our hands in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We are organizing in the Senate. They're organizing in the House. The talent and tenacity of America's workers haven't changed. We still are the most productive, hardest working workers in the world. We know how to make things in the United States of America. Our trade deals so often now amount to corporate handouts and worker sellouts, and unfortunately TPP is no different. They'll tell you it's different, though. The administration will claim it's got the strongest worker protections of any trade agreement ever. Well, that's a pretty low bar because they aren't very good. And understand, this agreement includes Vietnam, which doesn't have collective bargaining rights, period. It includes Mexico, where labor rights are regularly violated. We know that from NAFTA. One of my first votes cast in Congress in 1993, my first year there, was in opposition to NAFTA. We knew it wasn't going to work, and it's worked just as badly, unfortunately, as people thought. And if bad trade deals are any guide, we should be skeptical that Trans-Pacific Partnership labor provisions will even be enforced at all. It doesn't protect workers. It doesn't contain enforceable currency standards to crack down on countries like China. It includes something called investor-state dispute settlements, which is fundamentally a shift in our trade agreements. We've shifted from democratic, with a small d, democratic control to corporate control. So a tobacco company in the United States can sue another country if that country wants to pass protections for children against tobacco. A manufacturing company, a company in another country can sue over an environmental rule or a labor policy. The United States passes a good, strong labor, or a state passes a good, strong labor provision. A company in another country can sue our country over that. There's no reason that companies should be able to sue governments who have who've worked on democratic rules and democratic laws. That's fundamentally the problem with this. When I look at because of the work that you've done, I think we've made incredible progress in slowing down, maybe stopping TPP. But the fight, as you know, and I know that's one of the reasons you're here, one of the reasons you're going to Capitol Hill, and tell your stories as you do this. Talk about what these trade agreements have meant. Talk about not just what they've meant to your job and your company and your union. Talk about what they've meant to your community, because you can look over. Annie and I were talking about Greene County. Xenia, Ohio is a town in Dayton, Ohio, or towns that have just been eviscerated because of bad trade agreements, because of NAFTA, because of PNTR, because of CAFTA, because of other trade agreements. So it's so important that you go to the Hill, tell your stories, and hold members accountable. Now, there's a guy out there running for president who is saying all the right things about trade. He's saying we're going to fight again, we're going to make America great, we're going to fight against China. Well, let me say a couple things about that. First of all, this suit I'm wearing, it's made by union labor 5 miles from where I live in Cleveland, Ohio. Donald Trump, and we talked about this because we have, particularly in certain pockets of Ohio that have been hit hardest by trade, Donald Trump's words fall on some pretty receptive ears because people are legitimately angry about what's happened. But these are going to be painful one-on-one talks that you're going to need to make with your members who are buying some of the Trump stuff. But remind them that Trump outsources to China his clothing lines that he sells, his ties and other things. Remember, Trump is against the minimum wage. Trump is against prevailing wage for the trades. Trump is for right to work. Trump will never, ever, ever appoint anybody like Tom Perez, right, Chris, as Secretary of Labor. And think of what Perez has done. The overtime rule. 140,000 people in my state will get a raise because of the overtime rule. 5 million Americans will get a raise. So these conversations, and I heard some things Chris said about Hillary the other day, very positive things. Hillary clearly will fight and protect labor rights. She cares about these issues. She will stand strong with NLRB. She'll stand strong with the National Railway Act. She'll stand strong with the NMB. She will stand strong on a Secretary of Labor. All the things we care about, she will stand strong against TPP, and that's why this is so important. So I'll close with this. About a few years ago, not that long ago, I was in Cincinnati at a labor fed meeting. It was a county AFL-CIO dinner, and sitting in the front of the room at a table were 6 or 7 middle-aged women, probably half white, half African American, and they. Someone said they are SEIU members. They signed their first union contract. They had just organized the custodians in downtown Cincinnati. There are 1,200 of them in the bargaining unit. They had just signed their first agreement with the downtown business owners. I mean, these are people that were making $9 and $10 an hour with no benefits, without much to say for the work they were doing. And so there was a seat at the table. I went down. I got off the stage and I went down. I sat with them and talked to him. Turned to a woman next to me and said, "What does it mean to have a union?" She said, get this. She said, "I'm 51 years old. This is the first time in my life I've ever had a paid 1-week vacation." Think about that. And so when you hear these right-wingers, or you even hear these self-satisfied people that look like me that dress in suits, and they talk about, the union movement was important once. It really mattered back in the 30s and the 40s. Tell them stories like that. Tell them stories of what having a union could mean to those tellers that are making $12.50 an hour. And tell them what having a union can mean for those workers, those janitors who now have a paid vacation, when so many Americans don't have a paid vacation. In fact, you can hold up your union card, and that's why you have a paid vacation. That's why you get time and a half. That's why people like Secretary Perez can do what he can do. All of those things. And the last thing I'll say about that is I was talking to Dan and to Todd about 2 organizing efforts they're doing. One is an old auto plant. It was actually organized by IUE many years ago, and UAW, I think both, if I remember, in Dayton. The other is the University of Akron that Todd's working on organizing, and they've had success so far. They already have the trades. They're organizing administrative staff, I guess. And the one in Dayton is 1,000 workers. It's a Chinese company. They've come in. They're paying very low wages. They're making glass for auto, I believe, right? And but they're not organized, and they will fight the drive. But what I ask is just to emphasize how important organizing is. You know this. But my only admonition is call on people like me. Everybody you've ever endorsed for mayor, for city council, for township trustee, for legislature, for Congress, call on them to help you in organizing drives. I mean, I've walked picket lines in organizing drives. I've called management and said, you ought to be neutral in this, or you ought to back off the kind of things you're doing. I've written to the potential bargaining units saying, this is a really good idea, or I've stood back, whatever works. Sometimes you don't want anybody outside coming in, other times you do. But your call, but start to call on people whom you've endorsed, people you've helped get these offices. Call on them to help you in your organizing drives. Because if we don't organize in this country, if we don't organize more flight attendants, if we don't organize more industrial workers, if we don't organize more retail workers, we're going to lose the middle class. You know that, and you know what the anti-union fervor in this country and what they've tried to do with you with the right wing and its money. So just remember those workers in Cincinnati. Remember those workers who are tellers. Remember what you're doing at Norwegian Air. All of this. Work with us. Let us help you. How we organize more men and women in the trade movement. It's how we strengthen our country. It's how, in fact, we do make America great again. It's how we do it by organizing. Thank you.